everybody there hated everybody else and didn't trust them. And in a sense, that's what the moneyed elite in this world has been doing for the last 150 years. They've been trying to make sure that black people and white people and now Hispanic people don't trust each other, hate each other, and don't speak to each other. And
well, that's called divide and conquer.
Absolutely.
And then all the leadership of the groups that represent the white groups, the black groups, the Hispanic groups, the Asian groups, you track them back to the very same Rockefeller, Carnegie, Bill and Melinda Gates foundations, where the leaders are funded by them, and so they will then do whatever the leaders say, even though they're eugenicist operatives. That's why a liberal black person will defend, and so will a white, more than half of blacks never being born, because that's now a liberal sacrament, and you are a racist for not wanting black people dead.
That's it in a nutshell.
And, of course, it makes no sense, but they know through tribalism, through divide and conquer, that's exactly what's going on. Mark, I want to bring Aaron Dykes in here, one of our great researchers at Infowars.com in a moment, but what are some of the other facets of Maafa 21 that people need to understand, and why is it important this film be shown?
Well, first off, I think one of the most, and you know, Alex, I've always thought when you do a project like this, when you're doing research, if you don't learn as much as you eventually teach, then it was a failure. And I can tell you that I learned things in doing Maafa 21 that I never knew before. I've been in the pro-life movement for 30 years, and there were things about it that I didn't know that I found out. One of those was that the original groups in America who were opposed to abortion were not the Catholic Church or any of the pro-life groups that we all know so well today. It was actually the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam. It was the radical 60s civil rights groups who saw, this was before abortion was legalized, but they saw that white liberals pushing for the legalization of abortion was an instrument that was going to be used to wipe out the black race. They saw that clearly. And we need to understand this is part of this thing of keeping us all divided. Because when you start looking at, say, some of these the radical 60s civil rights groups, you think, well, the antithesis of that is white conservatives, when in reality, we have a lot more in common than you might think. And when you sit and talk with some of these guys, and I had a very unique experience here one day with a guy just literally walked up and knocked on our door and wanted to come in and talk. And he's in his 60s now. He was one of the founders of the Black Panther Party in North Texas. And he had seen Maafa 21 and saw that it was made here in Denton, so he lives here in Denton, and he came over to talk. One of the most interesting conversations I've ever had in my life. We talked for probably 2.5, 3 hours. And it was amazing to me to hear how many things that he talked about in the civil rights movement in the 60s were so similar to the pro-life and pro-family movement that we have today. And how some of the things that we had to fight against, today, they had to fight against back in the 60s. It was the exact same phenomenon, and they were treated the same way by the government. They were treated the same way by the media. The perception, I had this discussion with someone in the pro-life movement not long ago, and he said, well, all these 60 civil rights groups were XXX, and he had these preconceived ideas about them. I said, where did you get that information? I said, who gave you that particular view of these groups? And he said, well, it's just what I read and heard. I said, so the media gave it to you? And he said, well, yeah, I guess so. And I said, what do you think the perception is among people today in America of the pro-life movement? And where do you think they got that perception? The media gave it to them. Well,
let me expand. They also promote counterfeits, just like true constitutionalists founded the Tea Party in support of Ron Paul 4 years ago. The Republican Party 2 years ago openly came in, co-opted the name, and tried to take it over. It's the same thing. They do this every time.
Absolutely. And so, and I told this friend of mine not long ago, I said, look, if you don't want to accept the media's portrayal of you as a pro-lifer, then don't just automatically accept the media's portrayal of this man here in Denton because he formed the Black Panthers here in North Texas. And the perception that you have of him came from the same people who you now say are liars about the pro-life movement. It's the same group of people.
Well, also, they take unstable people from all these groups and then give them attention. And just like a lot of black leaders that are radical turn out to be closet feds, most white supremacists like Hal Turner and others turn out to be feds. It's all part of their divide and conquer strategy. That's why I have the ADL Southern Poverty Law Center attacking me on one end and then the Nazis attacking me on the other, because it's all the same crew, and that's come out over and over again. I want to bring Aaron Dykes in, one of our researchers. We've got a shot here of the molecular vision of life. We've got all these eugenics publications put out by the eugenics group. We have the former head of UNESCO, a book about evolutionary studies, about Aldous Huxley's brother, Julian Huxley, where they admit eugenics is their religion. Aaron, chiming in on this discussion, researching this, I mean, is eugenics not the heart of the New World Order's religion?
It is absolutely at the heart of that, and I think it's tied directly in with their quest for centralization for a world state. And I think that really ties in with the value of labor. In terms of, I think what's really interesting in Maafa 21, I haven't seen it in about over a year, so I hope I'm not misquoting, but he talks about how they were happy to have population grow under slavery with the black community because they could use them to work in the fields, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But once slavery was ended, they had an incentive to decrease the population, thus the era of proper eugenics.
And now the globalists in all their publications, you've got some of those. I want to impart this information to our guest because he's influential, Mark Crutcher. Now they write, because of robotics and industrialization, they don't need any of us, and that's why they have the headlines, Why the Future Doesn't Need Us.
Well, that's the other thing about slavery. At the same time that was happening was the culmination of the Industrial Revolution.
The cotton gin, all of it.
The Industrial Revolution ended in the monopolies that we see today amongst the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Fords, et cetera, et cetera. And those people have been looking to further centralize us. And, yeah, the rise of technology has further devalued the price of human labor, the value of it, to the point where they talk about openly killing us or using propaganda or psychological or biological techniques or all of the above.
And you're reading from their plans and expanding on that.
The birth rate, or they'll keep us as pets, as kind-hearted liberals, just as George Brown.
And by the way, you have the actual quotes from them there. You're reading from Bill Joy, the owner of Sun Microsystems there.
Yeah, he's quoting Ted Kaczynski, who was talking about the new Luddite challenge. The Luddites, revolted against the Industrial Revolution, devaluing human labor, whether they were right or wrong. Now we face a new challenge with technology, as they've continued to centralize society, to take over entire countries, entire regions, steer them and control what's
And that's what environmentalism's about, not the earth. It's about teaching you you're bad, you're worthless, to take on this group guilt, so you will then allow them to bring in a post-industrial world and eventually euthanize you. We're going to come back with our guest, Aaron Dykes, for 2 more segments. Then we're getting into the economy and a bunch of other news and your phone calls. I know folks are holding. You can hold till 8 after next hour, or you can call back at that time. And I got a bunch of news that ties into this, where they're telling you that you need taxes on you, a one-child policy. That's how it started in China. If you have 1 or 2 children, this is now being mainlined, and children are being taught that they're evil in schools. We'll be right back. This is the system, the belief system that drives the ruling class of the world, including the communist Chinese, where they have forced abortions. And now forced abortions being promoted here in North America. It's being promoted in England and Europe. And they have your children in the public schools. They are teaching them that families are bad, your parents are bad. I've read you the quotes here. It is outrageous that we're allowing this to go on. I want to go back for the rest of this segment, the next, to Mark Crutcher of LifeDynamics.com, who made the excellent film Maafa 21, Black Genocide in the 21st Century. We have it comboed at Infowars.com with in-game blueprint for global enslavement that gives you the full spectrum of what's going on. But a lot of folks will say, so what? There are too many people. Remember, you're being targeted as well, idiots. For those of you out there that giggle and laugh about this and kind of fantasize that you're part of the ruling elite because you buy into this. Aaron, I want Mark to comment on some of your research, but get into some of the other quotes. I mean, when they say it's a religion, that's in the book put out by the Eugenics Society, worshiping the founder of transhumanism, who said he changed the name to transhumanism because eugenics was unpopular after Hitler.
Yeah, that's true. And we're talking about Julian Huxley, the brother of Aldous Huxley, who was the first head of UNESCO, part of the United Nations steering group to centralize everything and take control of the entire life process. That's really what it comes down to. And he talks about, first they quote a Dean Inge, who says, eugenics is capable of becoming the most sacred ideal of the human race, as a race, one of the supreme religious duties. And then Julian Huxley says in his 1936 Galton lecture, I agree entirely with him. Once the full implications of evolutionary biology are grasped, eugenics will inevitably become part of the religion of the future, or whatever complex of sentiments may in the future take the place of religion.
And they admit that they can change any genetics they want. I mean, these are the people destroying the environment. With GMO mosquitoes released, fish with dozens of other animals in them, all sorts of genetic scourges already happening. And they talk about, well, it's like Ray Kurzweil. He says, I don't believe in God yet. I'm going to be God. These people, and by the way, the Wedgwoods, the Galtons, the Huxleys, the Darwins all intermarried and believed in the 1860s it would make supermen. Within 2 generations, hardly any of the, we cover the numbers in Endgame, almost all of them died or were completely retarded. And so the ones that lived, I mean, you look at the Huxleys and folks, they were crazy, mad hatters, just like royalty from Egypt on interbreeding. Your comments on that, Mark Crutcher?
Well, yeah, and, you know, you mentioned Galton. Francis Galton is now considered to be the father of modern eugenics. He's the guy who actually coined the word eugenics. That word did not exist before Francis Galton made it up. And what a lot of people don't know about Francis Galton was that he was Charles Darwin's first cousin. And you're talking about people who were avowed racists. Darwin and Galton both wrote that Africans and blacks and Aborigines, which we didn't have Aborigines in the United States, but that they were basically indistinguishable from the highest form of primate, which they said was the gorilla. And if you read Darwin and Galton's writings, what they said was that the way to make the human race better was to get rid of the humans that were closest to the apes.
Well, sir, just 2 years ago, the head of the IBM Human Genome Bioweapon Program, you know it as a Human Genome Project, had to resign when he said blacks weren't human. And I mean, the point is, though, and they're not just for people that are racist out there. They're not just targeting black folks. They're targeting because they're not just saying they want to kill people they see as inferior. They also want to kill the bad sons, Northern Europeans that aren't under their control. Have you run into that research, Mr. Crutcher?
No, I haven't. But we concentrated on the area involving African Americans because I think that what they did with African Americans is they wanted to prove a philosophical point. And then once you make the philosophical point that you can make the human race better by getting rid of one particular group, once you've done...
Stay there. Back in 1 minute.
Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
All right, into hour number 3. Got a ton of news coming up after this break. I appreciate Mark Crutcher joining us. This is only a 5-minute segment. Aaron's got information to the stars about this stuff, where they call the populations they're going after targets. They said we got to get government health care in place so then we can force people to have sterilization and abortion for access to health care. That's what government health care is about. The Nazis had that. And all the same systems are being brought back, but it's liberal and trendy. Mark Crutcher, you were trying to make a point before we hit that break.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that I think that the eugenicists in the 1850s, 1860s decided that blacks could basically be a test case. They wanted to get rid of them, of course, but they had made their fortunes on the backs of these slaves, and now they saw them as a potential financial drain, so they wanted to get rid of them. But from a practical standpoint, a pragmatic standpoint, I think they saw them as a test case, and they're saying, look, if we can make the human race better by getting rid of these blacks, then once we've got the American people or the people of the world to accept this philosophy, then there's no reason that it has to stop at just blacks. It could be Hispanics, it could be poor whites, it could be Italians. It could be, Asians. It could be Chinese.
It could
whatever.
be David Beckham, because if David Beckham and Victoria Beckham can't have children, well, you can't either.
Absolutely. And so that's why it was so important to them to establish this principle. And the main target that they selected initially was the African American.
I want to get Aaron in here to add to that, Aaron.
The only place I disagree is that they started doing that worldwide starting in the early 50s. The Population Council was then founded by John D. Rockefeller